So my name is Joan Casey, and I'm the founder and president of Educational Advocates College Consulting, and we're here tonight to talk about extracurricular activities and their role in high school as well as in the college admissions process.
And my name's Katie Bacon. I'm a college consultant and also a writing specialist for educational advocates.
We'll get started. I'm going to share my screen, and I'll just say during the presentation, put your questions in the chat, and we'll answer them as we go. So, this is our agenda for tonight. And, we're going to talk about like why do students engage in extracurricular activities and, what are some of the things that they should do in high school just out of pure enjoyment? And then how do they, as they go up in the years in high school, think about it in relation to their goals and where they might want to attend college? We're also going to touch a little bit on, sort of burnout in too many activities. Sometimes students get too involved and parents get concerned because they're not getting sleep and maybe their grades are starting to suffer. So we want to talk about that a little bit. And then we'll also touch on case studies, in particular for those students that are applying to the more highly selected colleges. So first off, why extracurricular activities? So, I think one of the things that students who engage in school, they're more likely to like school. They're more likely to develop relationships with their teachers and their peers. And they often have, a higher GPA than students who just go home after school. Um, in addition, they also develop a better sense of self. They get to know themselves, they get to know their interests, and this often can lead to better self-confidence. They also experience better social development. So they're working, collaborating with other students, they're disagreeing, working things out, being part of a team, whether that's the debate team or a sports team, learning disappointment, learning what it's like to be a mentor to others. So they're really learning a lot of skills and often sometimes leadership skills. And then finally, it's perfectly fine. There are sometimes students that don't want to get involved in activities at school for whatever reason, but they do get involved in their community. So maybe they're involved at their temple or their church, or they work at a food pantry, or they, have a job. So there's lots of other things students can do, and being connected with their greater community can also be really meaningful for students. So here we have, a whole bundle of activities represented here. And I guess the point is that students can get involved in so many different things. It's not like, you have to do a sport. Sometimes parents come to us and they say, "Oh, he or she doesn't really like sports." It's almost apologizing because we live in such a sports-focused culture, but there's no, you don't have to do sports. It's perfectly fine. That some students might want to do science research, or they're, getting interested in social justice, or they want to learn what it might be like to be an engineer. Students are musicians and they, love the outdoors and they might be involved in an LGBTQ group, or, enjoy working with children, having a job. So there's so many ways that students can get involved in their communities.
Joan, should I take it from here?
Yeah, the slide, I don't know why it's not moving for me, but give me 1 minute. We're having a lot of technical difficulties. Here we go.
Um, okay, so what do colleges seek in terms of extracurriculars? Colleges have lots of different types of spots to fill on campus. They want a vibrant community, so they look for evidence that an applicant will get involved on their campus if they're admitted. As Joan was saying, it's a myth that colleges expect certain activities such as sports or volunteer work. We really believe that students should pursue their interests, and if they like what they're doing, their enthusiasm is going to be evident in their activities resume and their school counselor recommendations. And then their activities may even shape what they want to study at school. Um, so Joan talked about this a little bit, but there are pitfalls of overcommitting, and then how you can avoid burnout. So when students are too busy, it's often because they're pursuing achievement for unhealthy reasons. They lose sleep, grades slip, and activities that they once really enjoyed become just another checkbox on a to-do list. And parents can intervene by helping students reduce commitments and being firm about it, despite any resistance they might get from the student. And it can be hard because students may feel a lot of pressure to be involved in many different things, and but sometimes all those activities are just too much, and they have to choose the ones that they really enjoy and focus on those. Um, or, students might need to reduce the rigor of their curriculum if one or more activities are really important to them, like if they're playing club sports and a sport at school, or they're doing some sort of leadership activity within school or outside of school. But they may need to focus on the activities that are the reason that they get up out of bed in the morning and get excited about going to school. Um, and students may explore more in their first 2 years, um, ninth and 10th grade, time permitting, and then narrow down and deepen their interest during their last 2 years. Um, so along these lines, the moral is if students are excited about what they're doing, they will be more genuinely appealing as admissions candidates for colleges. But more importantly, they're going to be happier because they're going to be doing what they're interested in doing, not doing what they feel like they have to be doing. So, in terms of crafting an extracurricular profile, I know that I think we've arranged here kids in ninth, 10th, and 11th grade. But the beginning of high school is about a transition. It's about making friends, continuing established interests, and then trying some new activities. In 10th grade, students can take the lessons of the previous year and start to make changes. And if interests are emerging, they can use summer to explore them. Although, most are still too young to get a paying job at this point, other than babysitting or things like that. Um, in 11th grade, students can think about any activities where they have a potential to have a leadership role. They may want to express to an adult in charge of their interest in such a role and get advice on how to reach that goal. So, for example, if your child wants to be a sports captain, they can begin showing leadership by mentoring younger players on their team, teaching skills to teammates, helping the coach with practices, and things like that. So 12th grade. Hopefully at this point they have leadership roles. They're a captain of a sports team, they're editor of the school paper, they're president of a club, or they've grown an interest into an independent activity or one that shows initiative. So an example of this is an aspiring engineer joining with like-minded peers to construct a greenhouse for a local food pantry, or an aspiring scientist who's worked in a lab the previous 2 summers developing their own research project with a mentor or assisting an established researcher with their work. Um, so, here are a few extracurricular profiles that most colleges would find appealing. Again, the larger overall point is that engagement of some kind is key. It shows colleges that you're an interesting person who wants to contribute and get involved. Now, for larger schools, places like University of Texas in Austin or University of Michigan, they may want you to have done extracurriculars that tie into the major you're interested in. This is especially true with majors like engineering, nurses, computer science, and business. So here's our first case study. This student, she was a business applicant to Fordham University in New York. Fordham is a moderately selective university. It has an admit rate of about 50%. So as you can see on here, she played 3 sports, which shows obviously ability to work with others on a team. She worked on the yearbook, and actually, in a way, if you think about it, that's a small business because staffers have to figure out funding and put together a product. She worked at 2 different restaurants, got to know the owners, and really paid attention to how they ran their business. And then she took photographs for local school teams. And so she was able to present these extracurriculars as tied in with her interest in business and what she wanted to major in, and she did get in. Um, So next we'll turn to profiles of a few successful applicants to highly selective colleges, which have a couple
Yeah,
other features to them.
okay, so I'll run us through these. So as Katie just showed us that, most students, first of all, most students are not applying to the colleges that admit less than 10% or less than 5%. Most students are applying to colleges that admit a lot more students than that. So one of our goals tonight was to show you the difference. So, as Katie just showed you with the Ford applicant like that, that student, was, a solid, active kid, engaged, the kind of kid that most college campuses would have, not necessarily, playing leadership roles, not necessarily being captain, editor, things like that. But somebody that you would want on your campus because you don't want a campus full of leaders always either. So, but now we're going to distinguish that because in case any of you have students that might be applying to really selective colleges or are thinking about it, we just want you to understand who tends to be successful. So before we get into the case studies here, sometimes you might hear, people say things like, "Oh, well, to get into a selective school, you need to be pointy versus well-rounded." I just wanted to talk about that and explain that a little bit. So when people say pointy, what they mean is that students get involved and interested in activity, and usually it's more of a single activity or maybe a couple of related activities that have the same theme, and they get involved at a really high level, and that does tend to be true. Now that doesn't mean that what we would call well-rounded students that dabble in a lot of different things and they have some leadership skills, it doesn't mean that they would never get in, but there does tend to be a theme that even among the well-rounded students, they do have a couple of threads that show a deep interest. So that is really something that one will notice. And, just to kind of give you some context when we're talking about, the most selective schools in the country, which are not just the Ivy League. I mean, you can look at the top 20 universities and the top 20 liberal arts colleges, and those are all gonna be very, very selective. So, if you look at just for context, the number of US high schools, which if you don't include virtual high schools, it's probably about 27,000. And then think about like if each of those high schools has a valedictorian, which they won't all, but if they each do, most of them will. That's, 27,000 top students in the schools. And these, for example, just using the Ivy League as an example, they have about, 17,000 spots. So, when so this is of course before we're thinking about legacies and, recruited athletes and people they want because they're incredible musicians or they're bringing other talents. And interestingly enough, I think Brown reported that they deny 70% of valedictorians, and Duke says they deny 90% because getting into those schools has more to do with your extracurricular activity. Not, I wouldn't say more, like they expect you to have high grades and high test scores, but that's not enough because so many students have high grades and high test scores in a rigorous curriculum. So these schools are looking for something extra that the student is bringing to their school because they're trying to create a class, and they're also schools that consider themselves like producers of future leaders. So they want, like, the best musicians, the best, athletes, people that are gonna be the incredible debaters, students that are gonna, be activists and use their voices on campus and, fill a lot of different interests, a lot of different majors. So let's get into some case studies. So I can tell you, I certainly wasn't like this in high school, but this will give you an idea of the kinds of students that are successful in some of these really hard to get into schools. So this is a student who's now a freshman at Stanford that we worked with. He was a computer science applicant, so his profile is he had, you a lot of these kids you'll see awards, like not just like the book award at school, but national and state awards. So, like, he had been recognized as an emerging leader. He had developed an app that was like App of the Year. That was a national award. He was a top finalist with a new business idea in the country. So, like, pretty high level recognition. As a sophomore in high school and just researching and being interested in a particular area of computer science, he stumbled upon somebody that shared his interest that was a grad student, a PhD student at Stanford, and he contacted him and became his research assistant. He did that for 10th, 11th, and 12th grades of high school. He actually did 2 summer paid internships in engineering computer science, and one of them, he worked with a company actually based in Massachusetts. This student lived in the Midwest, but he, had relatives, so he came and he did an internship, and he, designed an AI tool that was later used by the Department of for Defense. So, I mean, obviously, he wasn't the only one working on it. He worked on it with a team at this corporation, but that's pretty high level project for a high school student. He started a group where he led hackathons for like high schools in the region and got students together like several times during high school to help nonprofits with their tech needs. And he was, as you can see here, I'm not gonna read everything, but he was on a number of councils. So he definitely was, like, very deep in the computer science world and doing things at an extremely high level that's really unusual for high school students to have. That's not who most students are. Most students don't have this kind of deep interest in initiative, but these are the kinds of profiles that these colleges like to see. Now he was involved in other things too, as you can see, but like Katie said, sometimes students prune what they do, and as they go up in the years, they focus more and they may drop some things that they did earlier in high school.
Okay, so our second case study is a
Oh,
student.
okay.
He is currently a senior. He got in early decision to Brown. And I would say that he is an example of he's well-rounded, but with a very deep interest. And also, I mean, I think that his activities are, there's maybe a little less leadership here, although he has a lot. But he also was able to present himself through his extracurriculars and also the rest of his application as someone who I think a school would really want as part of their community. So, that's one of the things that extracurriculars can do, that they can kind of paint a picture of you and how you would fit into a given community. So he wants to major in data science, which actually is not a major that's available at Brown, but Brown, you can create your own major. So he's planning on studying data science, but kind of pulling from computer science and photography and all these different things to kind of create the major that he wants. Um, so again, he's an example of someone who has a deep interest in a topic. In this case, his interest started in childhood. And his main extracurricular here is independent weather forecasting. He actually has a Twitter following of 900 people, and I've checked recent storms on his Twitter feed. And this grew out of just a simple like love of snow and his desire to understand when he was about 12 years old how to predict winter snowstorms. So again, he now builds the forecasts and broadcasts them on Twitter. And a lot of his extracurricular interests tie into this or have grown from his interests in the weather and data patterns. And so he doesn't want to study weather forecasting in college, but he does want to, as I said, he wants to study data science, and it's been this organic growth into that. So some of his other activities, he works for a school newspaper and he's the science and technology editor, and he also writes on those issues. He did a data analytics internship at Northeastern where he analyzed huge amounts of weather data and compared it to social science data on people's moods. He created and monitors a weather station at his school. And on his own, he takes photographs of clouds, and he's learned to use them to predict the weather. And then he actually used those photographs and put together an artist portfolio for Brown. Um, so and the data he also helps run the investment club. And obviously this doesn't have to do with the weather, but it does have to do with data and data science. And it kind of grew out of that love of the weather and love of data. And then in general, kind of, separate from the weather and data, he's very involved at his school and in his community. He does several sports. He's head tour guide. He leads community service initiatives in the city of Lawrence. But again, I think the main thing, the important thing to understand about the student is that all these extracurriculars grew from his passions and the things that he loves doing and that are important to him. And he's not doing this because he feels that he should, but because he's genuinely interested. So it's grown out of that. Um, so that is
Yes.
what we have. Sorry.
Yeah, no, we had a question about summer, so I thought we could talk about summer a little bit.
Yeah.
So if yeah, and if you have a more specific question about summer, put that in the chat. But so I think that we're really always thinking about who is the child in front of us, right? And I mean, we all know that not every kid is going to be the kid that is going to have this kind of a project with weather or go really deep, and that's certainly not who everybody is. So I think that, you always have to think about summer in line with who the child is. So, as we said at the beginning of high school, maybe they, want to go back to, if they did an overnight camp, maybe they want to go back to the overnight camp. Maybe they want to go back and be a CIT. Maybe when they're old enough, they really like the idea of working, getting a job. I think in the younger years, if students have an interest, we've seen students that really like art, they might art classes, or they might think they want to be an engineer, so they might do some kind of an engineering program at a college, just to kind of get their feet wet and see what kinds of things interest them. It really depends. So if you have a student that's a like a working really high level and loves math or something, there are some math programs that are for those kinds of students that, they might want to do that sort of thing. Other students, they might, babysit, do volunteer work. So I think the key thing, as Katie said earlier, is as you go up in the years, ideally, you want to go from, your parents writing a check to do a program to doing something more independent and showing more initiative by the time you're in the summer before senior year. So a progression. So, you're not, again, all of these things are exceptions to the rule. You might have a late bloomer who really wasn't very engaged with school, and now it's the summer before senior year, and that student has become engaged and thinks, I might want to, um, you know, go into business, major in business, and maybe it would be a good idea for them to do a pre-college program related to business because they're not really sure and they don't know that much about it. So maybe that would be a good way for them to spend a little bit of their time in the summer. But for other students, maybe they have done something that is summer before and they want to build on that. So, for example, students, let's stick with the business theme, like students, maybe did some kind of a program when they were younger, like an entrepreneurial program. And then maybe as they go up in the years, they have a summer job, but they're also like starting a little business on the side, like they have an idea. And so they're kind of continuously building their skills. Now, none of this is meant to be pressure. Like, none of this is meant to be like, I don't want anyone watching this to feel like, okay, my kid doesn't have a passion and, they need to get a passion. Like it doesn't really work that way. I think that of course we always want to be talking to students about their interests and their strengths and like, helping them see what they can do with that. But we certainly don't expect everybody to be like these last two students we profiled because though, as Katie said, those were genuine. That was just a genuine passion from both of those. Nobody created those kids. Like they kind of just that's who they were. So I don't know if we addressed your question on summer, but if you have a more specific question, please feel free to put it in the chat. Or any questions. If there are any other questions that anyone would like to ask, please do. Okay, so somebody wrote here, between the Simon Summer Research Program at Stony Brook and the Clark Scholars Program at Texas Tech. Which one is viewed more favorably by the top colleges? The activities that so I don't think, these programs are necessarily viewed favorably one way or the other by colleges. Like, I don't think summer programs in and of themselves, make a college go, "Oh, we're gonna admit this student because they did that summer program." I think that doing a summer program is part of a whole. Like, that would be part of this student's whole story. Like, why did they do this summer program? What were they doing in the summer program? How does that relate to the rest of who this student is? How might the student build on that next summer if depending on how old they are, So I don't necessarily think that, that there's an answer to that question. So I think the student, if they're thinking of doing something like this, they must have a reason and they should do the one that seems to fit them better. Whether that, their interest, their budget, their location, ease of getting there, that kind of thing. What other questions do we have? All right. Well, feel free to, as we're wrapping up here, to put any additional questions in the chat because we're happy to share more knowledge. We just wanted to give you a brief overview of extracurricular activities. Katie, do you want to wrap it up for us?
Sure. Yeah, so if you would like to contact us, as you see on the screen, our email addresses are here. Feel free to take a picture of it, or you can go to our website. All the information is there too. If you'd like to schedule an introductory meeting with us, complimentary, so we can talk more about kind of our whole, plan and the way we work with our students, then we would love to talk with you about that.